Hello, I'm Robert. I help people who are scared of many things and by connecting them to the accurate information. And this is what Dr. Tedros said about explaining how variants arise and how we can prevent them from arising. And let's just listen to him talk.
There is currently a lot of concern about the Delta variant, and WHO is concerned about it too. Delta is the most transmissible of the variants identified so far, has been identified in at least 85 countries, and is spreading rapidly among unvaccinated populations. As some countries ease public health and social measures, we're starting to see increases in transmission around the world. More cases means more hospitalizations, further stretching health workers and health systems, which increases the risk of death. New variants are expected and will continue to be reported. That's what viruses do. They evolve. But we can prevent the emergence of variants by preventing transmission. It's quite simple. More transmission, more variants. Less transmission, less variants. That makes it even more urgent that we use all the tools at our disposal to prevent transmission. The tailored and consistent use of public health and social measures in combination with equitable vaccination.
So that's more transmission, more variants, and less transmission, less variants. And so I did this graphic to try to kind of show you a little bit about what he's talking about there. And the way to understand this is that if you've got, say in the United Kingdom right now, we've got 28,000 people, yesterday I think it was, who got COVID. Each time the virus goes through a new person, it makes maybe half a dozen very minute changes. Now, most of those changes, each amino acid in the protein, each little bit that makes up the protein, it's got a genetic code of three nucleotides on the messenger RNA, which creates that particular amino acid. And so if one of them changes, and each one, the multiple ways of expressing the same one. So if you get a variant that just in your body, that you get these ones that are completely harmless, that will actually express the same amino acid at the same point. And when that happens, then the virus that comes out, or even though it's changed and you can tell it's changed, it's exactly the same in terms of how it works. It's got a different genetic code, but the genetic code, it's like different instructions. It's like you make the same table, but you've got different instructions and a different way that you make it, but it ends up with the same table at the end. So, but from time to time, you'll get a change, and then you get other ones where it's just rubbish, it's just completely nonsense thing, that the random change in the virus just doesn't work. But from time to time, you'll get a slight change in the virus, which is actually useful. So right now, today, we've got 28,000 people in the United Kingdom, just today, who are starting this process of the virus evolving through their body. And then, weeks, a few days from now, if they have not isolated from others properly, then they may well give it to others. And when it gets to others, it's gone through their body, it's evolved, it's gone in and out of their cell billions of times, it's gone into a cell infected, just lots of copies of the virus, gone into another cell infected, just lots of copies. And by doing that, it will then make minute changes before it comes out and infects someone else, because you have little mistakes in the copy, in the cells. And so that's how the variants arise. And when you've got intense community spread like we've got in the United Kingdom right now, then you will get sometimes two viruses. So you've got a couple of friends and they've been to different parties, and then you both have a party together, and you get the different viruses from each one, different variants from each one. And then when that happens, then the two variants from the different people will start competing in your body, and whichever is the best one will be the one that wins. Then also you get something called recombination, where one of the viruses may swap a chunk of it. They both infect the same cell. They both start making the virus, but they get bits of the other virus by mistake. And so and then that lets you to mix and match different bits of different virus. And so in this way, today, we've got 28,000, or yesterday, whenever it was, 28,000 people got infected, and they're all doing these experiments in mixing and matching the virus in lots of different ways. They're getting sometimes two variants and mixing and matching together, and sometimes they just make little tweaks and changes. Most of the times it makes no difference. But now, if you've got enough people doing that, then from time to time, one of those people, then something will pop up that makes the virus better at infecting the cells, or better at infecting other people. And that is how a variant arises. And at the moment, if you look at the first four variants, and Delta, although Delta was only identified quite recently, a couple of months ago, it was actually, you go back to the database, they only became a variant of concern, but the genetic sequence was in there, and nobody realised there was anything interesting. It was in there way back in October. Because we don't know, we can't look at a genetic sequence and work out what it's going to do. The only way we know, maybe in the 22nd century or 24th century or something, we will be able to do that. And we'll be able to look at the virus and work out what it's going to do. But it is way ahead of present day kind of Star Trek level of understanding of viruses to be able to do that. We can't do that. Nowhere near. And so the only way we can know what a tweak is going to do in your body is to find out what it does in practice. So the Delta variant, way back in October, is just one of numerous variants uploaded to just said whatever it's called, the genetic genomes database, and it was sitting there, and nobody thought much of it. It's just one of many. But then in April, whenever it was, May the 7th, I think, was when the United Kingdom called it a variant of concern. This one, but it turned out that this was really spreading and overtaking all the others, and it's more transmissible. And there's something in the way it got tweaked, and they don't know. They once it's happened, and once the tweak has happened, they can then study the virus and study how it interacts, and they can work out what it's done, and study what it actually does in practice. They can't predict it in advance. So we have 4 variants arise in the first 100 million cases, and we haven't got any yet for the next 100 million. That doesn't mean that we know new variants since then. It just means that we haven't identified them yet. And we say there could be one from there that we just hasn't got to us yet. We just haven't noticed it. And the more this continues, it's running at about 25 one variant if you just go to the first 100 million. So I don't know if you count those 4 variants as in the first 200 million or in the first 100 million, but if you count them as being in the first 100 million, then that's 4 in every 100 million. So if you've got 25 million people all doing these experiments in their bodies with viruses, recombinating and recombining and make site changes when they go into the person and when they come out, then if you've got enough people doing that, then eventually you'll get another variant of concern. So the variants don't just come from nowhere, and the virus doesn't have a brain. It doesn't think, oh, if I do this, then I'll be able to infect someone more easily. It does lots and lots of experiments with unthinking chemicals in millions of people. Eventually, if you've got enough people, it leads to a new variant. And so there were none in the first half of 2020 because there just weren't enough people to get significant variants, apart from the B614G, which may have been a bit more transmissible. So that is the background to what Dr. Tedros was saying there. And So I did a rough calculation. This is not meant to, please don't quote it as if it was research, but just to give you a rough idea. Then if 50% of, just back the envelope thing, if 50% of the population of EU and US got COVID, that's equivalent to about 12 new variants, if it is running at 1 per 25 million. If 50% of the population of Africa got COVID, that would be 20 new variants. I don't mean the ones that don't do anything, I mean variants of concern that significantly change. It's the same if half the population of India or half the population of China got it. Because that's 500 million people. So you can see that just this virus has got a long, long way to go. There's only a small fraction of the world population has been infected, and then some of the new variants may start, once you've got a large number, a very large immune population, either vaccinated or previously infected, then with so many new variants evolving, then out of those 20 new variants, if any of them has a significant vaccine escape, and they'll, or natural immune response escape, and they'll go through everyone again. Just like flu does, we get new variants of flu every year. So if you're immune to COVID, it doesn't mean you're immune for life. It would be if we would keep to the ancestral variant. It might be, well, we don't know how long the immunity lasts. They were very glad to find that it lasts for a very long time, much longer than expected for the natural immunity. But it doesn't mean that it's going to last forever, because we've already had examples of people who've been infected a second time by a new virus, variant of the virus. It's very rare, but if we have lots and lots of variants of concern, that's going to become common. So, and then we've got to stop building these new variant factories. And unvaccinated people, there's also vaccinated people also can actually, because it can get into vaccinated people in the United Kingdom, it's getting into vaccinated people already, and we're getting vaccinated people ending up in hospital, and we've got very few sadly dying who are vaccinated. So it's doing these experiments in vaccinated people as well. And obviously the virus is, when it's in a vaccinated person, which is happening in the United Kingdom right now, today, it's happening. Thousands of people who've been vaccinated and getting COVID, and usually very mild, maybe even asymptomatic. And the viruses that are in them, they're even within their body, they're experimenting and trying to get around, not intentionally experimenting, but doing these random mutations. And if the virus manages to evade your vaccine-induced immune system or your natural immune system, then it's got an advantage. So we've got all these experiments going on right now, today, in the United Kingdom, where the virus is working towards a vaccine escape. Because it's got, if half the people that it encounters are vaccinated or immune, then it can double the rate at which it spreads if it can have total vaccine evasion. And that's not going to happen all in one go. It'll just erode it little bit by little bit. But the more it can evade the vaccine, then the faster it'll be able to spread. So the effective R will go up. The Delta can be suppressed, and we have the example of India suppressing Delta, but it's very, very hard. Israel is finding that Pfizer, they've just opened up so much, and they would have to start doing restrictions, at least masks again, because Delta has more vaccine escape. It's 64% of transmission is stopped, they find, in Israel. Recent results today, that 64% of the transmission is stopped with Delta, whereas with Alpha, it was 95% of it is stopped, including asymptomatic with the Pfizer. We have found with surge testing is the way of doing it, surge PCR tests, flood testing lots of people. We succeeded in doing that in Bolton, but then we've got just so many cases in the United Kingdom. They're still trying to do this, I think, but it's not too many. We're just totally overwhelmed. If you can keep cases low, you can stop it by all sorts of techniques. Once you've got thousands of cases a day, once you've got 28,000 cases a day and rising, it's very, very hard to stop. Especially if you're opening up more and more as you do that. But the vaccines are still strongly protective against hospitalisation for Delta. But these new variants, then it may not continue to be like that. So you may well get people who are, maybe the hospitalisation will be eroded as well, and you go back, so that instead of a 20-fold reduction of hospitalisation, you get a new variant, so only 10-fold, only 5-fold, only 4-fold, only 3-fold, and so on, as it gradually erodes the vaccine escape. Now, the vaccines are continuing to improve very fast, and the vaccine capacity is absolutely huge, as we see here. Next year, that's enough to have one dose for everyone, all the 7.8 billion people in the world, every 3 months, if we actually go to that vaccine capacity. And when you go there, the estimates tend to go up from time to time. The new technologies coming along will make it easier to make vaccines. So as long as we keep at it with making the vaccines incredible, and some of these things that talked about this, there's the Hexapro tweak. If you've got the Pfizer in you, then the Pfizer vaccine has got a little tweak. It sort of sticks bits of the spike together, so it looks like this pre-fusion. This is before it goes into a cell. And you want the antibodies to attack that. This is what it looks like after it fuses with a cell. It gets much fatter. You don't want to target that because that's too late, because it's already going into the cell. So the Pfizer vaccine, unfortunately, naturally, if you make the vaccine, it tends to go into that shape, and they have these little kind of sticky bits that kind of stick the virus together, stick the vaccine bits of the vaccine spike together to make it look like that instead of like that. And the 2P tweak, which Pfizer have, help to make it more effective, but sadly the little bit that they've got, it's not that effective. They still have quite a lot of ones that look like that. And you don't want antibodies to that, they do absolutely nothing. You want antibodies to that. The Hexapro tweak gives you, greatly increases the number of the spikes from the messenger RNA creates that look like that. And so they make a vaccine that you can have smaller doses, and it's got a stronger immune response. You are training your antibodies to look for the right thing exactly, and you're not confusing it with other things that aren't quite what you want them to look for. And so this is a generation 2 vaccine. It's actually, we've got Brazil has started work on, and Butavax, is that what it's called? Anyway, and based on Hexapro tweak, which is licensed for free to weekly economies. So we're getting these vaccines where are based on whatever can be licensed to the weekly economies, because sadly we haven't got TRIPS. So a lot of countries, the weaker economies, it's actually backfiring. It's not good in terms of the economics of the long term for the big vaccine companies in the wealthy countries if they wanted to have a monopoly, because the result of them hanging on so tightly onto intellectual property is that companies around the world are developing vaccines that don't use their intellectual property. And so that's what's happening. And so the result will be that there'll be lots of vaccines next year that are just not covered by the patents that the wealthy countries have. And then others will be done in Africa, because Africa just hasn't patented, Pfizer hasn't patented the vaccine in Africa. And so there's a WHO South Africa hub with the blessing of the CEO of BioNTech, and they are going to be making vaccines in Africa for Africa. And that means that we're going to have much less of this vaccine inequity, where as time goes on, because the weaker economies will be able to make their own COVID vaccines. And this, sometime end of 2022, I think we will be in a situation where it's much less vaccine inequity. It won't be possible for the stronger economies to hog the newest vaccines, because they're produced all around the world by all the countries in weaker economies. They're actually inventing new vaccines, which is already happening in the weaker economies, being produced by the weaker economies, adding their own touches, their own intellectual property, but they don't tend to, they understand the importance of making it available to everyone. So these will be vaccines that are actually shared. The intellectual property is shared, and so they're just bypassing the wealthy, these intellectual property that the wealthy countries are hanging on to so tightly. And so long term, we're going to have a vast amount of vaccine development going on. Absolutely incredible. There's a new story just about every day, every week anyway. Sorry, not every day, every week. There's probably a new story about a new kind of form of vaccine, new way they're looking at vaccinating, making vaccines, and a new kind of vaccine technology. And there are about 32 last time I looked in phase 3, and so we've got light at the end of the tunnel with these absolutely wonderful vaccines, extraordinary things. We also, hopefully, we've got 300 or more therapeutics that are drugs, and all sorts of different kinds of drugs that are in trials. And hopefully some of those are going to, we've already had, just yesterday, I think it was the day before or something, we had 2 more drugs. They just reduced it a few percent. We've got dexamethasone, reduced a few percent. This reduced it by, if you had 25 people died, instead of 21 for this new, these latest drugs. And these again, the ones got these intellectual property issues, but they're trying to encourage, what's this, Roche, I think it was, or however you pronounce that, they're going to, they're trying to encourage them to license them for the weak economies at much lower costs, or basically at cost for the pandemic. We'll see what happens there. And so it's much harder. Lots of people get very puzzled and they think, we have these conspiracy theories, you've probably heard them, that the government is deliberately suppressing the drugs and promoting the vaccines. That's not what happened. What happened is that we were lucky. So they originally thought it would be wonderful if we had a vaccine that was 60% effective. Then they would thought that was wonderful, because flu vaccines, they're only 40 to 60% effective. And so they set the bar quite low at 50%. And then they said if it's more than that, it's acceptable. And then if Pfizer had been 60% effective, we would have had people shouting off the rooftops and we've got a vaccine. And it was 95%, and it's well beyond their highest hopes. Very few people, I think, would have expected that a coronavirus vaccine would be 95% effective. So we've just been very lucky with the vaccines, that they've been so effective. It was not just luck, a huge amount of work gone into that. For 10 years, research into MERS and SARS vaccines, so that they built on all that knowledge, a decade of knowledge, and then we had all the finance went into it. The drug companies would not have developed these vaccines without billions of dollars of public funding. They just wouldn't have done it, and because they can't just take $1 billion on spec. Originally they didn't think there was any chance. They thought they didn't know what the chance was of a vaccine. So we've got this huge amount of funding. We've got the vast pandemic going on, which means a vast amount of people who need the vaccines. So a lot of incentive to make the vaccines, a lot of easy to test them, because you give them to people and you see if they get infected, and you find out that they're successful very quickly. So we've got huge advance in vaccines, just incredible amount is going on. And so we've already got the vaccines are stacking the deck in our favour, and let's stack the deck in our favour further by improving vaccine inequity. speed up. There's no reason at all why Pfizer can't be being made around the world. We've got this vaccine hub in Africa which shows that it can be done. Why don't we have a vaccine hub in India to make Pfizer? Pfizer, India is expert. It's the one that I think it's the top manufacturer of vaccines in the world. If we can start a vaccine hub in Africa, why can't we start a vaccine hub for Pfizer in India? And the reason is IP protection. And that's why the Moderna we've got Novavax and AstraZeneca. Novavax coming along soon, and they have been very open in letting, and not just with the patent, but in transfer of the technology and the know-how. Moderna have done a kind of formal thing that their patent is available for anyone to use around the world, but sadly there are lots of secondary patents that they have to think about, and then there's also the transfer of technology and know-how. So it's not easy to make the Moderna vaccine. And in the end it turned out Pfizer is the one that they're going for in Africa, not Moderna. And so if you are a person of influence, then if we can influence, just spread this awareness of what's going on, and the wealthy economies, it just makes no sense, absolutely no sense. These vaccines were developed with billions of dollars of public funding. It is in the public interest for the entire world to be vaccinated as fast as possible with the most effective vaccine available. An extraterrestrial looking at us, somewhat more advanced in civilization than us, more gone through this stage, this very early primitive stage that we're at now, where we just are not very easy for us to work together, although much better than a decade ago. It's amazing how we've moved in even a decade. But we've got a long way to go before we reach high civilization, in my view. It's just the start of what an extraterrestrial would regard as the beginning of high civilization. They wouldn't be impressed by technology. They'd look at it would mean nothing to them. It'd be no more advanced than just chipping away at the first stone tools or rubbing two twigs together to make fire. They wouldn't think much of all our electronics, these big bulky things. They're probably much easier ways of doing everything. But they would perhaps see that we're making a transition in moving to a more equitable world. And we're in the middle of that transition. It's very uncomfortable right now because we're in the middle. But that's where we're headed. We're headed towards a more equitable future. And the G20 summit, they're meeting just now, or quite soon, I don't know if it's just a few days, I think. When they meet, then I do hope the G9 was a great disappointment. They had this big thing about, we're going to give away a billion doses. The wealthy economies have already got advance orders for 2 billion more doses than they need. So they're going to, if they don't give those away, then they'll be just wasting them by the end of this year. So it promised to give 1 billion doses, total it's actually 800 million, I think, or something, in the next year, when they're going to have 2 billion doses they don't need by the end of this year, even taking account of booster shots. So it wasn't a very generous outcome from the G9. I hope the G20 is going to be more generous and not just give some doses, but the G20, I hope they will actually really say they're going to invest significant funding into the transfer of ecology, of technology, transfer of know-how. We should have the Pfizer vaccine being made, at least starting on it. If we start now, we're going to need it. We're going to need these messenger RNA vaccines in 2022. The way it's been surging, people just opening up recklessly, then it's not going to end this year. Not especially in the weaker economies. We're going to have it hugely suppressed, hopefully, by the end of the year in countries like the United Kingdom, United States, Europe. But we may well have these new viruses that evade the vaccines. And if it's spreading through Africa, that's 1 billion people. And That's lots of new variants can start there if we don't act quickly to help the Africans to stop their surge. So look at all the variants going to come up there. And that's one of the places I'm most concerned at the moment. And then all the where it's surging in Europe and United Kingdom and all the vaccine invasion. So we need to stack the decks in our favour. We need to slow down transmission to slow down the evolution of variants of concern. So it's absolutely bonkers for the United Kingdom to say, okay, we can stop wearing masks when we have 28,000 cases a day. It's doubling every 9 days. They expect to reach 50,000 on 9th of July. They expect to go up to 100,000 a day at some point. And then taking away and stop wearing masks. It makes no sense. That's not science. And the July 19 date has just plucked from the sky. There's no scientific basis for July 19. There's nothing epidemiologically going on that makes that a good day to ease up on measures. Nothing sensible. There's no scientific reason for easing measures on July 19. Nothing about that date. It just makes no sense. There's no, especially masks which have no impact on the economy. I mean, like, if you imagine going to Hong Kong or Japan or Singapore and so on and saying, I really think you're making a big mistake. So many of you wear masks on the underground and in public transport. This must hugely impact on your economy. Your economy would be much more vibrant and you'd be a much better economy if you were to just stop wearing masks on the underground. I mean, imagine if someone from the United Kingdom went to these places and said that. It's utter nonsense. Wearing masks does not impact on the economy in any way. So that's just not a sensible thing. There's no sensible reason for stopping wearing masks at 50,000 cases a day and still rising, and probably still doubling every 9 days. If that would be, and 9 days later it would be 100,000 a day. It makes no sense. The more the cases per day, the more important it is to wear masks. And if you're a young person, your risk is higher than it has ever been in the United Kingdom, or will be by the end of this month. But do have a look at your epidemiological situation. For it's time where I live, on the Isle of Mull, the cases are actually pretty low and they're going down. I definitely think, I'm definitely going to keep on wearing masks because stopping transmission is just whatever. Even if the chance is very small, I don't want to have even a small chance of passing on COVID to anyone else. But so I'm going to wear a mask just all the way through until it's actually gone, or down to almost no levels in Argyll and Bute. But that's your personal decision. But certainly when transmission is very high, and this is the source of my graphic. This is about how this is where they looked in the tree and they found, these are all the October one. They didn't actually find, sorry, I'm my mistake. They didn't actually find the sequence for October. They found a sequence, I think it was in December. They found a sequence, and they found 2 sequences sometime around the end of last year. And then from the distance apart of them and the rate of virus evolution, they worked out that the Delta variant had evolved about October of 2020. So they don't actually know where it evolved, and they don't have the original sequence, and that's the normal situation. So yes, so that was good. So that corrected something that I got wrong earlier on. Anything else? That's it with the expanded graphic. Can I bring it up? So right, this is why it is so important. Let's just read that out. I'll leave my glasses on. Rather wonky glasses, never mind. This is why it is so important for wealthy countries to help weak economies with fast transfer of knowledge and technology to make vaccines and prioritise early doses globally. It's not charity. And this is why they need to suppress transmission globally to slow down the evolution of variants of concern. That's what variants do. They evolve. And then I explained all that before. Okay. Yeah, so we've done it. That's it. That's the end of this video, so I'll upload it and then I'll add that to the very short thread I got about that. Okay. So I'll put a link to the article, I'll put a link to a tweet about it, and just a shout out for I do these videos to help people in the Facebook group Doomsday Debunked. And if you are, what we do is we help scared people by connecting them to the best sources of information. We do fact checking ourselves as best we can. We look up the best sources, and then we help sometimes very scared by people, and we tell them the reality of the situation, no sugarcoating, but positive framing, which means you talk about positive things as well, and try and do it, talk quite a lot about positive things, like positive things you can do, like you can protect the lives of others around the world by being careful in where you stop transmission yourself. That's positive framing. Negative framing would be say, oh, if you go around and you get COVID, then you're going to make other people feel sick and get killed and so on. Positive framing is if you can stop the transmission, and you're going to make other people, you're going to stop other people from getting sick and stop other people from dying. That's a simple example of how we can use positive framing to create a much more positive message. And people respond much better to positive framing, and it inspires them to do the things that you're talking about. Because if you just try and make them feel bad about the way that they're infecting other people, that just doesn't work. Psychologically, that doesn't work. They just get depressed and don't do anything, and they just keep on doing the risky behaviour and feel bad about it. That's not good. Whereas positive framing is talking about what they can do that's positive, and then talking about all the positive things other people are doing, and talking about all the positive things that are happening in the world. And so it's just the way that you look at what's going on and how you present what's going on in a positive way, and that helps people who are very scared. And they don't generally want to be lied to. They don't want things to be, they often are very easily able to detect lies. And you don't want false comfort. You just want to know what the true situation is. So if you and with the infodemic, with COVID, then you'll be able to distinguish between things that are true and not, and things and what is junk science and what isn't. It can be very hard to understand, to detect and so on. Anyway, if you are interested in helping people who are scared, or if you're scared yourself, then do join our group. And it's very important to read the rules. So that the head of the group, a lot of our members are autistic, and they find it much easier to interact because it's all based on rules. It's not based, you don't just say everything like be nice. You have certain specific rules that people have to follow. So they're very obvious, straightforward things, but it's rule-based, so do have a look at the rules at the head of the group, and if we need to do any moderation, it's based on those rules. It's not based on gut feeling, it's not based on intuition, it's not based on saying, you're just not being nice to other people in the group. It's always based on specific things they've done that are specifically in the rules. So that autistic people know exactly what the reason is why there's been some moderation and what they have to do to continue posting in the group. Anyway, so that's the end of this. I'll upload this, and hopefully it helps some of you.